And we're back. Okay. Hi everybody. It's after Thanksgiving, so I'm wearing some kind of relaxed fitting shorts. Feeling it there. I'm here standing with this guy here. What this is an 850cc 360-degree parallel twin that Yamaha made back in the early 90s for a bike called the TZR850. And this engine in 750cc form powered their one of their dirt bikes to a couple of Paris-Dakar wins back to back in the day. So this is a extremely torquey, strong, well-proven engine. It's 5 valves per cylinder, 3 intake, 2 exhaust. Yamaha bumped it up to 850cc when they made it into a street bike. And Yamaha, again, was just way ahead of the curve on so many things. And so they created sort of what is sort of like the on-road, off-road adventure touring bike. Something with long travel suspension, but just had a great torquey, mid-range, strong engine for real-world riding. It was kind of a funky looking motorcycle in a lot of ways, especially back then in the early 90s, and the public, like the public often does, is oftentimes they're stupid and they don't realize what a cool thing there is until it's already gone. And so it was just only around for a couple of years in the American market. It actually survived in Europe because they understood, you know, these kind of bikes. It I think endured, or maybe is still enduring. It went up to 900cc form, and they changed the firing order to 270 degrees, but we'll talk about that later. Regardless, what the hell is it doing here? Well, you know those projects that you start way long time ago, and they're great idea projects, but you just don't get them done. That's what this little motorcycle series is going to be about, me getting this done, because I bought this I bought like a whole crash bike, but I essentially got all these parts back in 2004, 2005, because I wanted to build sort of a Japanese Ducati. And look, I wasn't the first one. My TZR850, which I've shown in other videos where I'm working on the Lancia, those motors, as cool as they were back in the day, Yamaha didn't see fit to harden the intake valve or the exhaust valves. And so, because there was like a high revving engine, the valves would get hammered at high RPM, and they would start to tulip. Instead of being like a flat valve that, you know, seals up against the roof of the head, it would tulip, and it would cause clearance issues between the valve seat and the valve. So much so that after a while you couldn't adjust any more valve out of the buckets, out of the shims, and so you basically had to take the motorcycle apart and rebuild it with new valves. And So that's what I was faced back then, because I bought this FZR400 at an auction, and I guess it was raced, and it had started acting funny, and my brother, he's an amazing motorcycle mechanic, his name is Rand, he told me about this issue, and I was like, well, what do I do? He's like, well, you could rebuild the head and do all that, or you could just get rid of it. And I was like, well, there's got to be another option. So I had stacks and stacks of motorcycle magazines. And so I came upon an old issue of Motorcyclist. Well, it wasn't that old back then, but it was about these German guys, Lenhardt and Wagner, or Wagner, I guess, if that's the German pronunciation. And what they did is they had an FZR600, which had a steel twin beam chassis. And what they did is they shoehorned one of these engines into that. And they made it run so goddamn well that Yamaha noticed, and they actually used that as the basis for creating their TZR850 Sport Twin, which we never got in the States. We almost got, but essentially it was a Japanese take on sort of the Ducati 900 SS, which is another motorcycle I've never had, which I've always lusted for. And so, you know, me back then, I had done an engine swap in my Volvo, and I was like, well, hell, how hard can it be? I'll do an engine swap on a motorcycle. So I found one of these bikes, a TZR850, down at the local motorcycle salvage. And it was like a front end collision, so the front wheel was kind of destroyed, but the rest of the motorcycle was intact, and it had only like 9,000 miles on it. And so I bought it, and I set about, you know, doing an engine swap. And this is one of the things that has fired me on my path of doing a lot of other engine swaps and motorcycle rebuilds and everything like that. But I never finished this one. And part of it is because it was a pretty, not ultra complex, but a pretty complex engine swap. The FZR600 aluminum frame is physically smaller than the FZR600. I said FZR, no, the FZR400 aluminum frame is physically smaller than the FZR600. And you can put an FZR600 engine in an FZR400 aluminum frame, but it doesn't fit in there perfectly. It's a little bit taller, and so it knocks into the radiator space and all that. This engine is a lot taller than an FZR600 engine, but it is also a dry sump engine. So it does not have a really deep oil pan, so that also allows it to be mounted lower in the frame. So yeah, it's been sort of a big long odyssey of figuring out how to best execute this build, and I think I'm on the home stretch here. And so that's what I'm going to be documenting in this series. Kind of one of the interesting things about the American version of this is for whatever reason, we got an extra half a point of compression in the engine for a little bit, stronger compression ratio, which gives it a little just better power and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a hotter engine than the rest of the world got. But that's really all it is. I mean, the rest of the world moved on and got a 270-degree firing order, which Yamaha started using for their cross-plane engines also. But yeah, they started the 270 degree firing order, which gives almost a almost Ducati V 90 degree V twin firing sound and feel to it. So this one is only a 360 degree uh, crank, which means essentially it's like one big single with both pistons going up and down, together, but they are firing at odd intervals. So its exhaust note I think is going to be a little bit flatter uh, than the 270, but it should sound pretty good. So yeah, I made up this fancy dancy little stand on my motorcycle lift, and what this does is it holds it at the appropriate height so that I can just put on the frame, put on the suspension. I mean, this is basically exactly where the engine sits when the motorcycle is all assembled together on its wheels. So, yeah, I've had to do a fair number of modifications to it, kind of externally, so it would fit in the FZR400 chassis, and I had to kind of sand and grind away at the back of the engine cases here, where I mean it's just extra meat on the engine, so it doesn't physically bother that, but it should be a fun, torquey, like little wheelie machine kind of my version of what Japanese Ducati would be like, but back in the 90s. So, yeah, it's not going to be anything super powerful. I think at the most this thing had right around 80 horsepower at the crank, not at the rear wheel. But it had a buttload of torque, like almost 70 foot-pounds of torque, which is quite a bit for this. Yeah, if you wanted to see like an example of this in its Paris-Dakar racing kind of version that they made, Harry's Garage, which is a channel that I just adore. Harry. I can't remember his last name now, but he's incredible, and he has kind of like a series of all the early Paris-Dakar winning motorcycles. And so in one of his episodes, he introduces, oh, you stupid chicken! Go away from here, you stupid chicken! He's kind of noisy. Anyway, he showcases a 750 version of this, and it sounds pretty cool. And he says it just, he kind of rides it around his property, and he says the thing is just motor, and it just tears off. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this experience is like riding this motorcycle after like almost 20 years. So yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I am going to get back to the Lancia. I've finally got some suspension bits for it, and so I need to fabricate some coilovers. But yeah, let's take a look at, I guess, maybe this engine or whatever, and I will show you a little bit about it. I cleaned up this engine and checked all the valves. I oiled the camshafts and pulled out the spark plugs and lubed the cylinder tops of the pistons, and kind of slowly, gently cranked it over a couple of times in order to kind of just, make sure that there's going to be enough, everything's got a nice wetting of lubrication on it. I think it's kind of like an attractive engine. I think it's kind of telling that like 10 years after this came out, BMW came out with their TZR850 parallel twin. A lot of people are coming out with parallel twins now, and Yamaha even came back to it with the MT-07. But yeah, so I don't know. I think it's going to be a fun little project here. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of where I had to grind into the back of the engine cases, and I had to cut off these tabs of it so it would fit. Yeah, and, you know, kind of removing little bits and pieces around the engine to make it fit in the FZR400 chassis. Yeah, I had to replace the oil pan on it and create my own dry sump oil tank and my own exhaust, which I decided to use some Ducati 900 exhaust cans for it because I figure why not, and I thought they looked pretty cool at the time. Anyway, this is essentially my my love affair with a project that I'm going to finish. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and bye-bye.